thank you so much, Ria, for being with us today. And I'm really excited, and I look forward to hear everything about your knowledge, really. So to start with, could you please introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about you as a person, and then I'll ask more questions. I'd love to know. Thank you so much, Ria.
Thank you so much for having me, Corinne. This is really lovely, and I'm slightly nervous, but I'll do my best, and we'll see where it goes. I'm Ria, and I am currently a PhD student at the University of Cambridge. I've been a teacher for many years in different capacities, and I'll take you through that shortly. But I've moved to the UK about 2.5 years ago, and so now I live here. I'm doing my PhD here, but I've also I'm originally from India, but I've also lived in a lot of different countries. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and then moved back to India, and then yes, I know that you were in Saudi Arabia for a bit. I remember.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've had that connection, and then moved back to India, and then also lived in Japan for a bit. So I've lived in quite a few places. I really consider myself a global citizen in that sense. That's just, I think, hopefully that will suffice as an introduction.
This is amazing. Oh, I'm going to ask you lots of spontaneous questions.
Yes, absolutely. Feel free.
This is really great. Okay, thank you so much, Ria. Okay, so could you please tell us a little about your academic journey so far? So what led you to do the PhD? Why, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with this question because it's non-linear in my case. It's not been A to B to C, but again, I'll do my best. So my bachelor's was in mass media, and I actually graduated with a degree in journalism, and I worked with an international, a national leading daily at that point in India. And then I covered the really heartbreaking terrorist strikes in Mumbai in 2008. And then I decided that journalism was not for me. I then changed tracks, and then I won a scholarship to study human resources in the UK. So I moved here, and then graduated, worked in human resources, and then realized that too was not for me. And then a professor of mine, someone very dear to me, asked me to try my hand at teaching undergraduates in Mumbai. So in the same mass media course that I had done. So I said yes. I said, what an exciting opportunity. I had no background in teaching, except my mom has been a teacher for almost 30 years. That was the only background I had, kind of like through osmosis, really. But I said yes, and I went to teach, and it just changed my life. I never looked back. And although I took a break in between to pursue photography for a little while, I never really stopped teaching. I worked part-time in colleges. I facilitated workshops. I worked as an outdoor educator and a camp counselor for a while. And then I went back after that, a couple of, I think maybe 10 years, I went back to re-qualify in education. So then I did a TESOL degree in international language education at Soka University in Japan. And they offered international students really a generous scholarship. So I decided to do that. And then I graduated from there. I taught there for 1.5 years. And then because I had such an amazing group of professors and a really great support system, they encouraged me to apply for a PhD. So I applied for a PhD and moved to the UK. And very briefly, that's been my sort of academic trajectory.
Wow, this is really incredible. And just could you please tell me a little bit when you said you were teaching in Japan, right? You were teaching in Japan. What age group are you talking about? What's the age group?
It was undergraduate students. So
okay, and what subject in particular?
So the subject was teaching. I mean, my master's was in teaching English to speakers of other languages, so I taught English. And at CEFA level, I taught sort of upper A, B level students. So that's the kind of level that I taught. And it was a really wonderful experience, I have to say.
Yeah, it must have been really incredible. And when you say that, in fact, going into teaching completely changed your life. You had almost like, it sounds like you had a revelation, right? So Could you tell me a little bit what you mean by that?
Mm.
Because some teachers, it does. It's not what happened. I'm the same. I'm just a passionate teacher. I love children,
Right.
and so I just want to know from your perspective what happened exactly.
I mean, I think it's hard to put a finger on it, but what it did was it like I kind of felt that I was also a learner, and I could be a learner for the rest of my life. Like it kind of made me quite excited about coming to work each day and feeling like, okay, I have something to learn. I have something to give, but I also have something to, really learn from my students as well. And when you're teaching, as I'm sure every day is different. So no 2 days are the same. You walk in, like something completely unexpected happens, or someone says something that really kind of maybe sets you off, or maybe even just inspires you, or just, and you think, what is the answer to that question? I don't know. But it's so exciting because there's so much scope for growth, and there's so much scope for reflection. And I feel like it's a really healthy mix of, kind of this really fast-paced thing, but also slow, kind of inward-looking, the time that you need to take to be a better teacher. So I really enjoyed that process. And I was quite young, actually. I was 24 when I took my first class. So my students were actually about 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 years younger than I was. So the rapport was amazing because we had this, we were able to kind of really connect, and they taught me so much. And I always tell that, especially that first batch of, 3 years, they made me a teacher. I don't think nothing had equipped me for, being in the classroom, but they really kind of took me along and on their journey of being students. And I'm very, very grateful to them. So yeah, it was a mix of all of those things.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. That is really special. And everybody has their little, enlightenment moment. It's like, this is it. This is the one I want to do. And that's what happened to me too. I've got my little paper here because so now I'd love to know if you could explain what SOCA education and value creating education are. That would be really interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I think before I explain it, I need to give you a bit of context because, especially about the term SOCA, because it's not something that everyone comes across. And so the word SOCA comes from a term coined by a Japanese elementary school teacher called Jose Toda in 1929. And it refers to sozo in Japanese, so creation, and kachi, which is value. So SOCA from the two of those words. And Jose Toda's mentor was a school principal and educator also called Sunesaburo Makiguchi, who wrote a 4-volume work called the Soka Kyoikugaku Taikei. That's the system of value creating pedagogy. So Makiguchi and Toda were reformers, and they put forth this educational approach that centered the happiness of the learner in response to what was at the time a very authoritarian regime in Japan. And this society of fellow-minded practitioners that came together, that they created, they based their perspectives on the teachings of the Lotus Sutra by the 13th century Buddhist reformer Nichiren. So Toda and Makiguchi were men of conviction, so they really refused to give in to the tyranny of the authorities, and then they were imprisoned, and Makiguchi tragically later died in prison. But Toda went on to take on Makiguchi's ideas and take them forward, and then he became mentor to a young person called Daisaku Ikeda, who would then go on to become a philosopher and peace builder, and subsequently the founder of the Soka school system. Now, all this to say that really, in essence, the root of the value creating approach has a rich history of, of really trying to understand what the purpose of education is and what it means to receive and to give an education. So it's something that all of these men have contributed to in different ways. So when we talk about value creating approaches to education, they include the work of Makiguchi, Toda, and Ikeda. And I could go on forever and talk about the technicalities of value creating education, but I'll just use the words that Ikeda, he very beautifully distilled all of this into a very simple kind of, understanding. And he says the capacity, so value creation means the capacity to find meaning, to enhance one's own existence, and to contribute to the well-being of others under any circumstance. So that is the essence of a value-creating education. And here I'd really love to point listeners to this really wonderful article written by a pioneer in the field of Ikeda Soka studies, Dr. Jason Gula, who runs the DePaul Institute for Daisaku Ikeda Studies. And the title of the article is called Value Creation and Value Creating Education in the Work of Daisaku Ikeda, Yosei Toda, and Funesaburo Makiguchi. And it explains beautifully the history, the scope, and the evolution of the term Soka education and value creating education. And it's a very lengthy kind of thing to go into. So, but the article kind of really breaks it down to explain how, you know, the term Soka actually kind of was coined was used in English literature in from the early 2000s. But Makiguchi and particularly Ikeda never actually uses the term Soka education. What they use is really what they're referring to is the idea of value creation. So yeah.
Yes, and I did a little bit of research. Is talking also about humanism education. Mm-hmm. And so that's really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit, now that we are talking, just like this, the audience has an awareness of the time frame, like Makiguchi, what was the time frame that he came up with Soka education or humanism education?
Right. So Makiguchi was active in the 1940s, and that's when this kind of, so even though a lot of the work of, or the ideals of value creating education are inspired by Buddhist philosophy, they began, it really began in the heart of a teacher. That's what I love about it. And I think that's important to recognize, because even though, there's the Buddhist aspect of value creating education, it really is, at the end of the day, how we can kind of transform our hearts to understand, like I said, the purpose of education and how we can benefit other people. Makiguchi, so it was in the 1940s when we kind of, we see that movement beginning, extending all the way to the present day. And of course, we know that Daisaku Ikeda passed away in November of last year. And it's a really kind of, sorry, in 2023 November, I said last year because I still feel like I'm living in 2024. But yeah, it's gone so quickly. But,
yeah, I know. Sometimes my students, when I say, okay, now can you write the date, and they write 2024. I'm like,
yes, yeah, we're almost like 5 months in, but here I am. No, but it's this whole idea of what value creating approaches are have spanned across all of these decades, and then Ikeda kind of distilled, like I said, those ideas and then brought them forward as what he terms human education. So it comes from, of course, some influences of humanistic education from Pestalozzi and Rousseau and things like that. But actually, human education is the idea of really kind of how do we cultivate the humanity in students. And that actually should be the purpose of education, because Ikeda says that we're not, just because we're born human beings in a biological sense does not make us human beings. What makes us human beings is the constant capacity to be in touch with our humanity. And that's what the educational approach, as it stands right now, that's like Ikeda's human education is really kind of built around that. But it's this incredible work of, generations in that sense.
It's really incredible, because when you think about Maria Montessori, she also was a passionate educator and who really wanted to build peace, lasting peace. And the core of her, the principles are very much based on children developing and following, respecting the child's natural development, if you like, the child natural way of developing based on his biological, taking everything into account. And now with neuroscience, it's incredible, because everything kind of comes together. Not yet our educational system is not yet matching what we know about neuroscience, for example, but I think we are getting there slowly. But so these, humanistic education, I think, is so needed, because often when we look at societies, often I feel governments want to, they can see that investing in education is very important, but their goal and their mission is more to do with economic growth, for example. So they might look at education as a tool for in 20 years' time, and then, but the problem is there's a gap because we are human beings and we are not products as such. So there's suffering, there's many, and then you have rise in crimes, rise in, all of that is a reflection, I think, of a system, educational system that is not the goal, the root of the educational system. Their goal, their mission is, there's something lacking, and that something is, like you say, humanism. And anyway, so I'd love, this is fascinating. I'm always very fascinating about this, and I've always been very passionate about that. So I'm going to ask you, so you mentioned about so how did you first become interested in Daisaku Ikeda's work and the philosophy of value creating education? I'd love to know that.
Yeah, I was thinking, when I could, if there was a point that I could look back at and say, this is when I became interested. But I think what happened is when I started teaching in Mumbai, I was teaching undergraduates, I came across this essay that Daisaku Ikeda has written, and it's called Teachers of My Childhood, and it's freely available on the internet. And it's a really beautiful essay about Ikeda's own teachers when he was a very young child and how they deeply influenced him. And then he talks about this beautiful concept called, he likens the role of a teacher really to this gardener of cherry trees. And it's called, in Japanese, they call the gardener of cherry trees a sakura mori. So he says, this is a word, and in his, these are we're just quoting Ikeda here, but he says, this is a word that implies a sense of careful stewardship. The sakura mori look after the cherry trees, encouraging them to grow, tending to their welfare, and generally caring for them throughout the 4 seasons. The care they extend expresses faith in the power of life as it grows and develops into the future. They don't fuss too much about the trees, but at the same time, they never ignore them. They observe the trees' growth in great detail, but allow them to develop freely. And then he says, each child is also unique. Each has a distinct way of flowering that is his or hers alone. To raise a tree or to foster people, we need a patient faith in their potential to flourish. A child who has poor grades or is out of control and behaving badly now may in the future grow into a person who does truly remarkable things. It is not at all rare for a child who think we know well to suddenly change and show us a side that we never would have imagined. So to the precise degree, he says, that we care for and have faith in children, they will extend and spread their roots. And it is this that will give them the strength to survive and make their way successfully through life. So I read this and I was so encouraged, and I actually wrote it out into my teacher book at that point. And I was teaching undergraduates, so it's very difficult to reconcile this idea of Sakura Mori to these really unique, undergraduates who are coming in with their own distinct personalities and ways of seeing. And but it really gave me courage, and it inspired me, even on the days when I felt really tired and defeated. It really inspired me to feel like, as a teacher, I have a purpose. And this purpose is really, I need to figure out what it is, but a little care can go a really long way as a teacher. If I extend just a little bit of care to my students, that is going to really affect their lives. And so this essay is actually what made me curious to understand more about the role of a teacher, and then eventually value creating approaches to education. I think that's really where, if I had to think of a starting point, I think that would be where I would begin.
Yeah, I totally understand that, because sometimes when I was teaching in class, now I teach online most of the time, but still online or face-to-face, there's a connection, a life-to-life connection with the child. And although you might want to share a concept and so pass on the concept, if you like, but there's the intent that you share that concept. It's all in that intent, but that intent can be shared with the voice, with the the eyes, the body language,
Mm-hmm.
but at the end of the day, is the heart,
Yes.
that pulses, if you like. So
Yes.
regardless of what it is, it's
Mm.
about this passion that we can, pass on to the child, and so with a belief that they can do it, they can be successful, and
Absolutely.
regardless of where they are at. And
Mm.
and that's what I love. I love doing that. And you see in their little eyes something,
Yes.
it,
Yeah. It's a sudden
and I that
connection. Yeah.
yes, and you
Yeah.
can't really explain it with words.
No.
It's there's like something so special.
Yes.
And anyway,
Yes.
so well, thank you so much for sharing that. And your research explores Buddhist spirituality in education. Can you share how spirituality influences the teaching practices in of the education of the educators you are studying? So you are studying educators at the moment, right?
Yes.
And so shall I rephrase my question, because I think I was not reading it very fluidly. So your research explores Buddhist spirituality in education. Can you share how spirituality influences the teaching practices of the educators you are studying?
Thank you. I'll try to share what I've understood. So yes, my PhD focuses on, well, it's actually, at this point, it's shaping up to be a lot about also myself as a value creating educator, but also I have these wonderful participants who are teachers in India, who are Buddhist practitioners. Actually, they're practicing Nichiren Buddhists, but they also self-identify as value creating educators. So first of all, I feel very privileged and humbled because they shared such beautiful life stories with me, personally, professionally, a lot of, parts of their childhood. And I'm so grateful to them because it gave me a window into their lives as people and as teachers and as value creating educators. So what I feel they're telling me from my very early data analysis is that, like teachers around the world, there's so much anxiety and so much struggle. And they're doing such incredibly hard work. Sometimes they can't even leave their work at school. They come back home and then there's even more work because they have families, but also they have work from school. So they're really being challenged by this educational system every step of the way, even though they want to do more. Sometimes they're not able to because, well, physically, mentally, emotionally, it takes such a toll on them. But I think what has come through is, in a lot of cases, they say that their spirituality is something that offers them a place to look inward and a way to kind of do what Ikeda, he calls a human revolution. And a human revolution is this continuous, voluntary, deep inner transformation that occurs, really at the deepest parts of one's life, the depths of one's life. And because we are human, there are days when these teachers, they feel they're able to do this human revolution well, and there are days when they can't. And it's always like this process. But what they say is that they pray for their students, and they, when a student challenges them, they go back and they really have this, this conversation with themselves, which is very difficult sometimes. And I could totally relate to it, because I know when you're challenged by a student or you feel challenged, and sometimes the immediate reaction is to, either blame them or place judgment or just be really angry. And these teachers have expressed that they do feel this, all of this anger and this sometimes resentment, but they come back to a place where they're able to have this conversation with themselves to see if there's anything that they could do better. And I think that's really powerful. And I think that's where their spirituality is able to offer them a tool to be able to think more deeply about their actions, their behavior as teachers. And they're able to, some of them have actually narrated stories where they're able to reconcile that, that kind of difference between them and their students. And I think, yeah.
So is it a bit like a self-reflection? So, for example, some people might have a challenge at school with it can be any sort of challenge, but then naturally, as teachers, if you have the passion, and you would look into trying to reach out to that child, and so you would look at different tools to help you in the classroom, for example. So in this way, you self-reflect. Some people might not want that. They might go, okay, these are the tools, A plus B plus D, and you need to behave that way,
Right.
or else.
Or else. Yeah. Yes.
But other teachers might want to really explore many different tools so that they're not fixed. Is that what you mean by human revolution as well as a teacher? So it's more like to do also a self-reflection and question your your behavior, your words, why did it not go well? I remember when I was trained as a teacher, they used to say to me, okay, you have to do your planning is super crucial,
right?
And if it doesn't go well, that's because of your planning. And I was really stuck with that, because the truth is, it's not true. In my personal experience, it's not always true, because you have many different factors that come into play. And it could be, so a child might come home to school feeling, in distress, or you have different energy, different, and so it's not on very stuck like this. It's there's different things to take into account.
Yes. Yes. And I think you're so right. There's so many variables, aren't they? Like when you walk into a classroom,
variables. I couldn't find the word.
There's no, that's what I meant when I said also there's no 2 days that are absolutely the same in teaching, because every day you go in, there is a different variable that appears out of absolutely nowhere, and you didn't see it coming for most part. So I don't think it's just a question of planning. I think for these, so to answer your question about self-reflection, I think the best way I would describe it, from having read the literature on, what the fundamentals of value creating education are, is that there's this Mahayana Buddhist principle called the greater self and the lesser self, right? And it's very useful and very, very simple, actually. In reading it, it's very simple, but because it says that the greater self is the self that embraces the suffering of the other, right? And it says, okay, I don't see you as the other. You and I are deeply interconnected, and therefore your suffering is something I will embrace, and I will try and find us a way forward. Whereas the lesser self is always putting that barrier between the self and the other, and saying, no, I am me and you are you, and there is no way, for us to meet. And therefore that distinction is always creating problems. So for teachers, I think when it's I would say it goes beyond self-reflection. I would say it goes beyond a simple, just sitting down and saying, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that. It's a deeply challenging endeavor where you transform on the inside. So because it's not just a question of transforming, or it's not just a question of reflecting, going back and taking action the next day. It's a question of really what has changed inside you that will then lead to a change in your relationship with that child as well. Not just in what action you take, but really in how you view that child, and how you were able to kind of overcome that anger or that resentment, not just to put a surface level kind of band-aid over it, but really to transform something on the inside that doesn't allow you to see or to allow you to neglect that child is actually suffering in its own way. Or
that's very interesting, because here you're touching on deep compassion, and I think as educators, deep compassion is absolutely crucial to have in order to be able to do this profession. Yes. And so that's a very interesting. It's very interesting. And also you mentioned about the prayers. So I think the action of prayers, regardless of your religion, I think there's already you're omitting, if you like, a wish or a deep concern for the other person. So just to be able to do that is also a reflection of concern, deep compassion, profound compassion for your student, and therefore for humanity as a whole. So that's also quite interesting, because sometimes, obviously, tools are very important, and sometimes system in place hinder, in fact, humanistic education. For example, if I may mention that, the system of reward and punishment in place, it actually can, for some children it might work, but in fact, in the long term, it might have, and it might hinder the humanistic aspect of life itself.
And these teachers mention those things, like I think the challenges are also that we're always putting children in competition with one another. So we're encouraging them to always really, if you look at it in the way that I described, you're encouraging them to work from their lesser self. So not out of deep compassion, but really out of a sense of, I have to get better, be better than you and do better than you, because then I will get this reward or this job or pass this exam. And so there's no sense of really kind of getting them to cultivate within them a sense of, I need to take someone else along. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a systemic thing.
It's very interesting, because just if we had, for example, a curriculum that encourages to look after others for the community, to really take action towards the community and to help others, and have a system where there's more compassion being valued within the whole school. And I'm sure many schools do that, but not only the academic aspect, and there's such an emphasis on the academic.
Yes. And that's so universal, isn't it? I mean, we're talking from different contexts, but we can completely relate.
But if you are like me, I'm sure you've traveled quite a lot as well. If you went to Saudi, how old were you when you went to Saudi Arabia? That's so.
I was 3, actually, so I was very young. Yeah.
So from 3 to what
13.
age? Oh wow! So you spent a long time. Where were you in Saudi Arabia?
In Dammam.
In Dammam. Yeah. Oh, I was in. Oh wow! I was in Jeddah.
Oh yeah! Wow.
I love Saudi Arabia. I love Saudi Arabia.
Yes, and I really want to go back and see, because obviously it's a different place from when I was there as a child, and now I think things have changed tremendously. So I would really I would love to go back and see what that's like. So I think it's something I'm looking forward to doing at some point.
I'm definitely going back. As a music, I'm definitely going back one day. I hope.
Same.
So, why did you choose to focus specifically on Indian teachers for your study? And could you briefly describe their key characteristics and approach? I think you mentioned it in terms of the spirit, but is there any key characteristic and approach? If you want to develop that further, I don't know.
No, that's an interesting question. To be very honest, I chose to work with Indian teachers because I felt I could understand and relate to some of those challenges and some of their stories, since I myself have worked in that context of education in India. And I felt that was an important thing for me I wanted to be able to really listen to their stories and their dreams and their struggles and their fears and their victories and their challenges, because I think that teachers don't really get that space to talk about the personal aspects of their lives, which really influence the professional. But we're so intent on keeping the personal separate from the professional that we encourage teachers to be these people at work, but actually don't take into consideration that they may have so much going on in their personal life. So I wanted to really hear, that's why I chose the life story approach for my research, because it really kind of goes over your whole, literally all of the influences in your life and things like that. So, and I think because I self-identify as a value creating educator, I wanted to understand from other value creating educators' perspectives what they feel and think, and are there similarities, are there divergences, and I think their voices as individuals are important, but also as a community, it's important to see how we can learn from one another and with one another. So India is so diverse that even among my 8 participants, they speak about 10 or 12 different languages, come from different regional, linguistic, social, cultural, religious, and ethnic backgrounds, even within India. So I would hesitate to kind of say that there are a similarity in, like, there's a similarity in characteristics, because I think they really they work at different levels of the schooling system, and they all see, if there are, of course, there are many themes that are kind of emerging that I can see that everyone has, these challenges are similar and these challenges are unique. But I think, even as an approach, it's so, I can see how each teacher is so deeply influenced by their own teachers sometimes, and also their own lives and the progression of their careers, and how that, so everyone's approach is different. And it's amazing because here are these people with, this sense of, okay, we are actually a community in our own way, but also coming to this community from completely different paths and unique ways of seeing and being and doing. So, I think
that's very interesting, because sometimes, for example, if you are in a school, you have different teachers, but often what matters most is actually the teacher itself, in terms of the behavior, the energy that person can give. And if you remember, if you go back into your childhood, I have very vivid memory of my very wonderful teachers. I don't remember much the one that were a bit abusive sometimes.
I know.
But
we all have those.
But I do remember, in a very special way in my heart, the teachers that have really encouraged me, and they were very sincere. That's the thing as well. They were very sincere in their intention to really support me. And so if you reflect on your own journey, then you can, as a teacher, that's the same approach I should have, to have the same intention. Anyway, so I'm going to ask you your challenges and reflections. So what have been some of the biggest challenges in your research and journey so far? It sounds quite interesting. Yes. You said they were from different parts of India.
Yes.
And so just, this in and of itself, maybe that's part of your challenges, but please do share.
Yeah. No, that was actually something that really excited me when I finally realized that, wow, this is even just, I have 8 participants, but all are so different, and it's just it's a microcosm of what India is like, actually, even in the teaching system, I'm sure, students, teachers, everyone. But I think what's been really challenging for me is to really understand the intricacies of doing research in a niche area such as Ikeda Soka studies, because it's a steadily growing field, and I have these wonderful colleagues across the world doing really important work, so it gives me a lot of hope. But I think the difficult part was to really do a PhD with the kind of rigor that a place like Cambridge kind of expects. And it comes with a steep learning curve, because I don't have the kind of background. I didn't do a master's degree at Cambridge, where it's actually the master's degree where you kind of really cement your understanding of, research methods and things like that. But my master's at Soka University was very rigorous, and it taught me a lot. And it's just that the expectations are different. So it takes a lot of work when you move from systems, like even education systems in Japan, to like from Japan to the UK, and from India to Japan. It took me a lot of work to, I think, build that confidence in myself and build conviction in the work that I'm doing. So more than anything, I think I used to think that the challenge is actually the research itself, but more than anything, I learned, I think, over the past 3 years, that the challenge is not in the research, but it's in my ability to believe that I have the potential and the wisdom and the capacity to do and to do the research I'm doing, but also to create value in it, and not simply for myself, but for the field of Ikeda Soka studies, for my colleagues who I work with, for my participants, for my supervisor, for a deeper understanding of, where we need to get to in education. So I think that, like, really developing that conviction takes time and energy and a lot of courage and a lot of self-compassion, especially as a PhD researcher, when you're just, like you've always told, do the work independently. And I have a wonderful supervisor now, and she's so supportive. But by its nature, the PhD is a very lonely journey because you do the work on your own. And so what you really need actually is to develop that conviction that this is the struggle, but I have the ability to do it, and I have, I have what it takes. And I have wonderful family and friends, and my partner is incredible. So that gratitude keeps me going. But there are some days where I'm just like, oh my God, I have to recenter myself and, like really remember what it is that I'm here to do. And that takes some time. Yeah.
Wow, this is really incredible. And thank you so much for doing everything, because you are going to be contributing, and you are contributing to the future. And, if you think about it, I think many society right now, and they've been doing it for a while, reflect on a new approach in the system. And so all of that hopefully will also bring new ways and new beginning in schools, and adapt a different approach to education, hopefully, and this can contribute to that. So thank you so much. This is wonderful. And how has your studying these educators change or influence your own perspective on education?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question, because you always need to look back and reflect, because then you realize that how much things have changed. So when I first started, I had so much self-doubt that it took up all my time and energy, and it reflected in how I viewed everything. And I was like all I could see were the clouds, really. But now I look at the world and the misery and the suffering that we are inflicting upon our fellow human beings, wherever it is in the world. And I absolutely believe that education is the key, but it's also the place that needs the greatest reform, and urgently, right? We've had generations go through these systems, and we still have people choosing war. We still have people choosing genocide. We still have people choosing hate every day. And I think so. The system has failed us, or we have failed the system in some way, and we need to figure out where that disconnect is. So what it's taught me is really, we need to treasure our teachers so that they can treasure our students. We can't expect teachers to do the work without really feeling treasured as well, and really encouraging that, like, in teachers. But also we need to teach children that nothing is more important than developing that humanity within them, like Ikeda says, and really allowing them to contribute, reminding them that contributing to the benefit and betterment of the people around them is also to their benefit. That's how, like, mutual growth is how we will all grow and prosper. So I think we need to really turn education on its head. We educate for profit now, like you said before as well. It's economics that guides everything, but we need to think about our relationship to nature, to the universe, to each other. And I think it's made me really convinced that I feel like I'm asking the right questions, at least of myself and within my work. And I think it's a drop in the ocean at the moment, but this is where we begin, right? And there's so many people doing incredible work in education that we just need to come together, more and more, people who really believe that this is the time for change. We really need to come together. And like Ikeda, I think one thing I'd like to share is that there's one thing that I really use as my guiding principles for my research. And they're actually from these guidelines that Ikeda offers when he talks about education that encourages the spirit of global citizenship. And he says that it's really what we need to do is develop the wisdom to perceive the interconnectedness of all life and the living, the courage to not deny difference, but to respect and strive to understand people of different cultures and to grow from encounters with them. And number 3 is the compassion to maintain an imaginative empathy that reaches beyond one's immediate surroundings and extends to the suffering of those in distant places. And every time I read it, I get goosebumps, because I feel like it's a very, it's very powerful words that this is really the fundamental question we should be asking, is how do we develop this in our students so that we can do better by each other. So I feel like that's the change, from the self-doubt to coming into this really strong conviction that no, there's something here, and in education that we need to do. I think that's been an interesting journey for me.
That it's so beautiful, and also is to believe, because sometimes when you look at our realities, like, oh my god, we are a bit but to really have to believe that it is possible, a change is possible, but to have the perspective of long term.
Yes.
And it, we need to start. We urgently need to start, so that's quite interesting. I'm just gonna, in terms of closing this interview, so what advice would you give to young educators or students who are passionate about education and spirituality? I've got two, and one more question after that.
Yes. Thank you for asking, because it makes me think about what it is that I would have also liked to hear. I think one thing is that really there's space for everybody. We need everyone to be passionate about the things that they're passionate about, because then that's how the world will progress, because you need to feel passionately about what you're studying. And if you are passionate about it, then really develop your conviction in it, and ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. There's such, I couldn't have reached where I am without the help of my partner, my parents, my family, my friends, but also my colleagues who so generously make time for me to share, impart wisdom, to, take me along, and then to pay it forward, to do that for someone else who needs it from you. So like we're all in this circle, and we get and we have to give. So I think really to understand that your research is important, but what's more important is how you feel about yourself as a human being, and how you feel you're contributing to the world. That's the more important thing than than just getting a published PhD or getting getting a degree, because that human connection is what we need more and more people to kind of really cultivate and take forward. So I think really that cultivating a sense of self-worth, asking for help, paying it forward, it's so important. So those are just some of the things I think I would share.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And to finalize our interview, where can our listeners follow your work or learn more about what you're doing?
That's very yeah. I'm trying to think. Every time I think about maybe starting a web page, and I feel then I just don't do it. So I don't really have a place where they can follow my work yet. But what is very, very much out there for people to learn more about is the field of Ikeda Soka studies. And it's interesting because not a lot of people know this, but even at Soka University, in all of the Soka system, like the schools and the colleges and the kindergartens, of course, there are a lot of teachers who do follow the value creating approaches in the best ways they can. But these are not all Buddhist teachers, right? They're all non-sectarian institutions. So anyone can go to these universities and schooling systems. And what's beautiful about that is because people are seeing that there is value in this system of education system and way of seeing, and people are coming into it from many different backgrounds and religions and societies and ways of seeing. So it's very enriching it can be very enriching for anybody. So that's that in that sense. If one wants to learn more about the field of Ikeda Soka studies, I could share some links if you'd like to, if you need to put them up. Or
I would, especially the curriculum. It would be interesting what kind of curriculum, what kind of approach do they have in class. It would be very interesting in terms of the day-to-day approach in these schools. So that would be very interesting.
Yes, I mean the schools. I just have to say that all of the system, like the schools and the colleges, etc., they follow. They don't. There's no curriculum that says like this is a Soka education curriculum. That's the thing about it, because when Ikeda, again, even like all of these three educators, when they wrote about it, there's no manual. There's nothing to say that if I tick this box, I'm a value creating educator. A lot of it is really contextual, and that's why it's important for each educator to think about what it is that makes them a value creating educator, or how they can be one, and really kind of meet with the literature and with the academic literature, as well as the literature, like I said, that you find that Ikeda has written about his teachers on childhood, for example, and to really reflect on that and to really understand from a very individual perspective what it means. Because in every country, the way that value creating education is done is as per the norms of perhaps the country that the institution is in. So the approaches come from the teachers, and the approaches come from the underlying spirit of the institution, but it's not always tangible. And that's also one of the difficulties of my research, but it's also one of the most it's interesting, because that means we have to do the work, and no one will be able to tell us, but we have to meet with the ideas of value creating approaches to education and constantly understand what the work is that we need to do.
Wow, thank you so much. So I will put below the free transcript for our audience, and if you have a link, so I will also put below in the comments, and don't hesitate to follow the links to know more. And I just want to say a big thank you. That was a lovely meeting. That was lovely meeting you, and I'm so excited about all of this new development. I'm really happy, and so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karin, because I feel like having the opportunity to do this helped me learn again, and also look back at my journey and kind of make sense of it in a very deep and meaningful way for me. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity. So thank you so much. And I cannot tell you how useful it's been for me as well. So